First-person shooters burst onto the scene in the 90s, right alongside the emergence of 3D gaming. Rendering a game world in a 3D space demanded powerful hardware, which is why it's so insane to see things like Doom running on the Super Nintendo. It's pretty rough, but impressive nonetheless. But a first-person shooter running on the 8-bit Gameboy Color. How? And why? In 1999, British game programmer Ben John developed an engine that used a variety of tricks and self-modifying code to allow three-dimensional environments to run on Game Boy Color hardware. There really was nothing like it at the time. The engine would later be named Slit 3D. Terrible name. Ben John previously had worked as a programmer for game developer Psygnosis in Liverpool. Psygnosis? And left the company in 1999 with aspirations to create his own game. At the European Computer Trade Show in September that year, Ben brought with him a tech demo showcasing what his game engine can do. And there at the show, with his father Mike John and friend artist Dan Crawley, struck a deal with Eidos to develop a game. At the time, producer from Eidos, Ian McNeil, was tasked with managing the project. After seeing the engine and the potential the project had, Ian left Eidos to form a studio with Ben John, which they named Slitherine, with their first game set to be Game Boy Color's first and only first-person shooter, Tyrannosaurus Tex. Dinosaurs, robots, and cowboys. What's not to like? The premise of the game was simple. Aliens crash-landed in a remote part of Texas 2,000 years ago, discovered dinosaur fossils deep underground, and brought them back to life using their alien technology. Plus robots. The story was to be told using still frame images, but Ben John even admitted in an interview, the story's there really just to allow the dinosaurs, robots, and outlaw theme.
A lamp monster! Ooh!
Considering the game's ambition and being the platform's only first-person shooter, there was a considerable amount of interest in the game. But of course, we know now, Tyrannosaurus Tex didn't exactly pan out. When the game was officially announced by Eidos, the game was initially planned for release in March of 2000. Keeping in mind, the deal with Eidos was struck just in September of 1999. That's a pretty damn quick turnaround time. But we should also consider that development for a Game Boy game was definitely much smaller in scale than what we know about the industry nowadays. In January 2000, screenshots, concept art, interviews, and all kinds of coverage started circulating games media websites. But March passed, and of course, the game was not released. On top of that, Eidos backed out of publishing the game as the company was struggling financially at the time. So, now Slitherine, an unproven studio with an original IP running on an ambitious proprietary game engine, was left to find a publisher for their Game Boy Color game. There were even rumors and speculation online that the game didn't even exist, and that the screenshots circulating online were all fake. To make matters worse, in August of 2000, the Game Boy Advance was officially unveiled, and all of the hype and conversation in the handheld gaming scene shifted to Nintendo's upcoming console. That same month, Slitherine provided an exclusive prototype build to IGN, some of the first actual hands-on coverage of the game, and the preview was extremely positive. They were floored, the game is real, and the game is good. Included with the written article, 45 seconds of footage from the game recorded using a Wideboy 64. This 45-second clip would be the only actual video footage, some of the only proof that this game actually existed for a very long time. Because you see in the background, alongside all of the publishing woes Slitherine was facing, the game was riddled with bugs. According to Ian McNeil in an interview a few years later, it seemed that Ben John was not able to make any progress and not able to remove the bugs from the game, despite from a creative and design standpoint the game having been completed. To quote McNeil, this seemed to have been too much for him. Financially, Slitherine was being supported by Ian McNeil and his father John McNeil, and shortly after delaying the game again until Christmas of 2000, while still having no publisher willing to take a risk on the game, Ben John fled the country and stole the hard drive that contained the game's source code. According to Ian McNeil, nobody knew where he was. Later that day, a young girl turned up at the office to say that Ben was on a plane to Australia and was not coming back. I asked who she was, and she said she was his girlfriend. The whole thing was just too bizarre, so that was it. He had gone. The hard drive with all of the source code on it also went. Though we had made a backup, without Ben, it was of no use, as it was almost entirely written in assembler and unreadable. After supporting Ben, paying him tens of thousands of pounds over the course of the project, Ian was out of the cash, and he didn't have a game. Yes, they do mention that they had a backup of the code, but again, this was running on Ben's Slit3D game engine. He's the only one who even knew how it worked, and even then probably not very well. According to Ian, the police and even Interpol were involved in trying to track him down. The worst way to interpret it is that he had no intention of ever finishing the game. Ben's father, Mike John, who was also involved, also fled the country, apparently to Thailand. Like father, like son. And that was it. Tyrannosaurus Tex was dead in the water. Luckily for Ian, being experienced in the games industry, was able to bounce back, and despite Slitherine's rough start, the company found success developing strategy and war games, and are still active to this day. And while most people forgot about Tyrannosaurus Tex, the occasional question would still pop up on the company's forums in the years following. 13 years later, an eBay listing popped up for a prototype build of Tyrannosaurus Tex, apparently which had belonged to an editor from Tips and Tricks magazine. Now, major props need to be given to the fan site NintendoPlayer.com, who, from my understanding, were the ones who acquired the prototype, which sold for $720 and then subsequently dumped and released the game online, fully playable on an emulator. Despite the build being somewhat of a mess, it's still pretty crazy to see running, especially after the only footage that existed of this game before that was the 45-second clip from IGN that had been circulating online for 13 years. But the story surprisingly doesn't end there. In 2016, Pico Interactive announced that they had acquired the rights to Tyrannosaurus Tex. We have finally acquired the full rights of the game Tyrannosaurus Tex. We have gotten a ton of art from Slitherine, and with the ROM that is out there, and hopefully a backup of the source code of the game, we can finish the game, and even port it to PC and other platforms. And sure enough, the team over at Pico Interactive was able to salvage and finish up Tyrannosaurus Tex and turn it into a completed, legitimate product that you can buy, over 17 years after it was initially announced. You can literally go to their site and buy a copy of the game right now, which is absolutely crazy, and I love it. And you know, with selling the rights of the game, it is nice to see that Ian finally made some of that money back, albeit 16 years too late.
472 points, Slitherine House.
And to this day, there's no update on the whereabouts of Ben John. Also, it really doesn't make it easy to find info on someone whose name is freaking Ben John. Though what I do love, and what is incredibly ironic, is the only image of him out there is an image found in the game during the credit sequence on a wanted poster. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Deep Cuts. As always, please let me know what you thought about it. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it. It does help this channel out a lot. And of course, if you want stories similar to this one, consider binge watching the series using the playlist. Thanks for watching this one, guys. Peace.